this computer. Okay, you should see something that says recording. You guys see that? It's basically telling you
I got it.
Recorded. All right, so Magick.tv is back with a vengeance, and tonight, being recorded via Zoom, me and Wade are honored to have such an esteemed guest in the author, occultist, ceremonial mage, Enochian authority, Mr. Aaron Leitch. Good evening, Aaron.
Good evening. Nice to be here.
All right.
Took a little bit of effort, but we got here.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Like, the term that Wade taught me when I was a young Padawan was astral opposition. Okay.
Boy, it was in spades today.
Exactly. And on our first episode, we were getting cock blocked like crazy, but with a little bit of elbow grease, we still make things happen.
Yep. Show must go on, they say.
Exactly. So anyhow, Mr. Leitch, tonight is all about you. All right. We're going to talk about you, your practice, your history, your viewpoints. And in the end, we're hoping to learn something or two from you so that we can actually teach our viewers from around the world directly from a master like yourself. So I'd like to start off by asking you, what got you started into the practices of ceremonial magic? What inspired you to jump into this black hole we call evocation and ceremonial magic and Enochian? It's such a bottomless pit with so many unseen entities. So what got you into this?
Well, it was kind of a convoluted story, really. Just growing up, I never really considered myself religious, but I guess I was kind of spiritual. I grew up in the South, basic Christian, Southern Christian kind of upbringing, non-denominational, but very kind of Southern Baptist Church of God kind of air about it. So I grew to dislike churches very early, and preachers and that kind of thing. And I guess I don't even know why. I couldn't tell you why or what inspired me, but I just never lost the spiritual connection. It's like I still believed in God, and I just didn't like the way these guys were presenting him.
True.
So I was just going on my own. And, I'm just a kid. I mean, the most occult book I had ever read was like a Time Life Mysteries of the Unexplained book. I mean, this is 1970s and 80s.
I have all of those.
Yeah. And and of course they fascinated me. But I guess I was about college age. I graduated college, moved away from Florida, and I was actually living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, a real quarter horse town, on the Air Force Base out there with my dad. And I moved from there. Of course, a young kid that age isn't going to enjoy living in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So I ended up moving down to Denver, and that's where it really all started. I joined the Renaissance Festival down there, and so there, the Renaissance Festival in Larkspur, Colorado, was almost wall to wall pagans. You talk about the golden age of the '90s. That was it, man. Early '90s. Everyone there was either a witch or sympathetic to pagans, So I really got immersed in that whole culture. But because I had come from this Christian background, that was kind of my basis, which the pagans around me couldn't stand. But I wouldn't let that go. And a friend of mine, his name was Lynx, and he walked up to me one day and handed me this book. And he said, "You're into all that Catholic magic." For him, anything Christian was Catholic. So you're into all that Catholic stuff. Here, this is Catholic magic. And he handed me a copy of Don Craig's Modern Magic.
Catholic stuff? Okay, please continue.
And he thought it was Catholic. But it wasn't the first time I had seen that book, because I had been trying to study magic. I just didn't know how. And I had probably picked that book up in the bookstore a dozen times. But you flip through it and you don't really know what you're looking at, when you're a real noob, so I kept putting it back on the shelf. But he handed it to me, and I just opened it up randomly and landed right on the page where Don describes the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And what my eyes laid on was the Kabbalistic cross. So at that point in my path, I was still using the Lord's Prayer as a magical incantation a lot. I used it to banish spirits. I used it to cast protective spells. So when I saw the ending of the Lord's Prayer in its original Hebrew, my mind was blown. I was like, "Oh my God, this is it. This is what I'm looking for." So yeah, for right there, I sat down and I decided I was going to go through every one of those 11 lessons step by step. And that was 1993, I think. And
with you,
I guess
and
the
all the
rest
other
is
Hebrew speaking, you and all the other Hebrew speaking Catholics, right?
Hebrew-speaking Catholics, exactly, who study the Kabbalah.
It's amazing that Don Michael
Yeah.
Craig, God rest his soul, had such an effect on a person who would really set the trend with Enochian studies and trading of knowledge. I mean, you're probably
Oh,
one
I
of the
tell
only
you, man.
guys who really has this open forum. You had it in the Yahoo groups, now you have it in the Facebook groups, and everybody can kind of like trade notes for such an incomplete practice like Enochian because there's so much of it missing.
That's actually an urban legend. That's not actually true.
Oh, really? Please educate us because I'm
Yes.
learning.
Yeah, there are a couple of aspects that are missing.
Mhm.
The famous incident where the maid used the journal pages to drain pies because she just
Okay.
thought they were scrap paper. So some of the journals were lost to that. However, as it turns out, the bulk of what was in those missing pages he had already copied into his personal grimoire. His personal grimoire is 30. I think it's 3191, but it's the one that was published as the Enochian Evocation of Dr. John Dee. That is Dee's grimoire.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's the one
most
that
of that,
I have that one.
yes,
That's my
that was one
favorite
of my
one.
first.
I like that.
Yeah, it's
And
a very good book.
it's funny because a lot of the Enochian magicians that I know dislike that book to the extent that they had to change the title from they wanted to take evocation out of the title because they a lot of these people said, oh no, that's too goetic. So they eventually got
Okay.
republished as the Enochian Magick of Dr. John
Enochian
Dee.
Magick of Dr. John Dee.
Yeah. But it was the Enochian
I mean,
Evocation. I like that one.
I mean, you evoke angels too. I don't know where they came up with that one, but yeah, I do know Llewellyn changed the title of it, and it wasn't Dee's title or anything. He never named it. It was just his personal notebook, you know. But yeah,
You know, the funny
I've
thing
heard some
about
people
what
disliking that book lately, and I don't really know why. For a long time, it was the only published book that actually showed you some of what was in Dee's journals. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure why now all of a sudden everyone has a problem with it.
Well, if it works for you, it works for you. I mean, like right now, I'm like, one thing that I like is when I was going through your books, especially the angelical language, I actually love that book because you were one of the only authors a couple of years ago that actually talked about some of the more obscure rituals within Enochian, like the Gebofal and like the difference between the 19-day working and the 49-day working and stuff like that, that you actually went into depth with that. And it took a lot of digging around, especially when I was studying Enochian, that you got to get piecemeal from different sources to find a working system. Like a lot of the Enochian books I worked with didn't even give the prayer of Enoch, the one that you're supposed to say 3 days over and over again. It's like you'd have to really assemble your knowledge. And some people would just say, "Oh, I'll just say the calls. I'm practicing Enochian." I'm like, it's like saying,
it's not how it works.
Exactly. So that being said, I wanted to ask, what drove you to Enochian from all things?
That happened in the same place with the same group of people. I was in Denver. I wasn't living with the people that were Lynx had given me Don Craig's. I had a girlfriend at that point, and I had moved in with her and her roommates. And her roommate was also a magician. And he went over we're just talking, you know, and again, at that time I'm a noob, so I'm trying to pick up everything I can. And he said, you know those stories you see in fiction where the magician is standing in his circle and he's chanting these arcane languages, and then he mispronounces something. He just says one word a little bit wrong, and the demons just come out and consume him. And he said, that's what this is. And he handed me a copy of all things, Gerald and Betty Schuler's Enochian. It wasn't the workbook; it was their main Enochian Magick book, the little one.
Yeah.
And now I've said plenty of times I'm no fan of the Schuler's work, but this was the first time I'd ever seen this stuff, you know. And he handed me the book, and I opened it up, and of course, what do you see? You see all these arcane, bizarre, seemingly unpronounceable words, you know. And I was just like, this is it. I've got to learn this. I've got to know what this is about. So yeah, that was the beginning of it for me. I think from that moment I was enthralled. And you know, and Enochian Magick is so, like, if you have a mind for puzzles, for cryptography, for that kind of thing, it's going to draw you in because the entire system is presented like a puzzle you need to solve. Like you said, it's not presented in a step by step, here's how you do it fashion. It's piecemeal. And I don't mean in other sources like Golden Dawn, Thelema, all that stuff. I mean in these journals.
Yeah.
You know, you'll read a ritual, but then maybe 15 chapters in that journal later, he's made a marginal notation that corrects something he got wrong in that ritual.
Exactly.
And this happens throughout his journals. So you have to read everything he wrote from cover to cover and piece everything back together. But once you do that, most of the system is intact. It's not. See, the Golden Dawn had this feeling that it was a skeletal framework, and then they are the ones that made the meat to go onto the skeleton.
Yes.
But that it wasn't a skeletal framework. But the problem is, if you're you're living in the late 1800s, and your only source for this material is the British Museum.
Yeah.
So you have to go in there, request the books that you want, and sit down with them with gloves on, and very carefully go through it and take your notes, and then give it back at the end of the day. So they were literally in no position to truly decipher these journals. That wasn't done until the 90s, because once we had the internet, Enochian scholars from all around the world were able to get together for the first time, and these journals were digitized and uploaded for the first time. So that was when we were actually able to sit down and piece it all together. And yeah, surprisingly, it's all there. It's not a skeletal system. The whole thing is there.
Well,
And
plus,
that's what I'm trying to present in my work.
If your whole, reference for this, if your whole frame of reference was in the Golden Dawn, and the Golden Dawn looks at anything else, it's gonna look skeletal, because the whole system. I have the big doorstop edition of the Golden Dawn system of magic. Everything takes 11 officers. It takes like days to prep. You have the altar and this whole thing. Everything is so complex. There's so many elements to everything. It's such big magic that, yeah, if you look at something and it's just one or two guys doing something, I'll be, oh yeah, this is just a basic framework. I mean, where's the other 9 officers? You know, where's all their tools, their robes, and their flagellations? And so yeah, they would naturally think that it was skeletal because it wasn't like theirs.
Which brings me to my next question. Go ahead. I was going to ask, as a ceremonialist, because you also wrote The Secrets of the Magical Grimoire, and I'm really in love with that book. As in, like, I literally, like, my copy looks like something like the Half-Blood Prince from Harry Potter. I've got all these notes and annotations. Now, in the early versions of the Goetia, they actually say that before you do a Goetic working, you're going to use some of the calls of Enochian. And I wanted to get your personal opinion. Is this something that you would recommend you mix match? Like in a Goetic evocation, would you use the Enochian calls, or would you rather take these two practices as separate things?
Well, first of all, I got to point out there is nothing Enochian in the Goetia at all, anywhere. It's not there. What you're describing is what Crowley added.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about.
Crowley did not really understand the grimoires.
Okay.
Actually, to go back, and this plays into what we're talking about here, to go back to your previous point, in my work, I try to make a distinction. I coined the term neo-Enochian.
Okay.
Because I want to make a distinction between de-purist and what the Golden Dawn and everyone following the Golden Dawn did. So everything from the Golden Dawn forward, I call neo-Enochian. So that's where you use the calls with the watchtowers. You use the reform table of Raphael instead of the original. There's a whole different way of deciphering the angels' names than the way D was given. So and all of that, because it came from the Golden Dawn, is lodge style magic. And guys like Mathers, Westcott, Crowley, they did not even comprehend any other kind of magic. To them, it all had to be lodge style magic. So to your point, what they were doing was anything else they found, they would just slurp it up into their system. So and Crowley did the same thing. Yeah, and Crowley did the same thing. So he took his Enochian knowledge. He took the Bornless invocation, which honestly, the Bornless invocation is more in tune with the Goetia than anything Enochian is. So no, I would not. I mean, I don't understand why you would use the Enochian calls to call the Goetia spirits. The Enochian calls open the gates of heaven. So you're literally facing the wrong way. It literally doesn't make any sense to me. You need to open the gates of the underworld.
Supervise the drug deal at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
It's just very bizarre to me. Now, I can see using the language in Goetia in the sense of establishing authority. Like, there's been plenty of times in my life where, like, I'll be being harassed by a spirit or something, and I'll turn around and be like, "Oh, some voice go like a box launch calls voluntful," and they back up and they listen. So yeah, there's a use for it in that, but in the sense of applying the calls to the Goetia, that just doesn't make any sense. Or translating the entire invocation, which I don't think you can do. I don't think there's enough angelical words to actually translate all of the conjurations in the Goetia. I think Crowley had to make up a bunch of words to do that. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of mixing those two in the way Crowley was trying to, or the way even the Golden Dawn tries to. I'm very deep purist.
I get you, because like the next thing I want to ask you would be about the materials necessary from your point of view for all the viewers who are listening when we upload this, the bare minimum tools we would need to perform or to practice Enochian, because like for some people who've read like The Vision and the Voice, that's a story of Crowley and Neuenberg going throughout the desert in the Sahara Desert practicing Enochian. The first thing that came to my mind is like, well, how the hell did they lug all their stuff, their tablet, their ritual stuff? It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, the way I understand Enochian is I need the table of practice, I need the shoe stone, I need the ensigns of creation. That's too much to bring with me across the desert. So from your point of view, for a beginner or anybody who's practicing Enochian, what would you say are some of the bare essential tools you would say, if you even want to get into this, you need this first?
There's not really a cut and dry answer for that one, to be honest with you. I mean, the main thing to keep in mind in that sense is that people tend to view Enochian magic as its own thing. Like there's Kabbalah and there's the angels there, and then there's Enochian magic over here, and there's Enochian angels. But that's not really true. That's if you read Dee's journals, that's not what he was doing. He never even called it Enochian magic. He was simply doing angel magic. He wasn't concerned with, are these Hebrew? Are these Enochian? Are these, no, it's just angels. So like the table, the tools and all that, those are not for Enochian magic. They are, but not exclusively. They're just for angels. Any angels you want to talk to, that's what the system is for. So as far as which ones are necessary to do that, I think it depends a lot on what you're trying to do. For example, if you're going to do Gebofal, or it could be Gebofal, I'm not correcting your pronunciation because Dee never gave us one. But to perform that 48-day or 49-day ritual, you really need the table, and you really need the Book of Loga. But if you're not doing something specific like that, I don't necessarily. I don't know. This is such a strange, such a strange thing to cover, because I want to tell you what's necessary and not necessary, but at the same time, if I say this isn't necessary, your listeners will go, "Oh, that's not necessary," and they'll check it off their list.
Exactly.
So I have to be careful with what I say. So let me just tell you how I did it.
Okay.
First of all, I was called by the angels with no tools. They can definitely talk to you and call you and communicate with you on their own.
Agree, 100%.
Once they called me, once I knew this is a system I needed to learn, I started putting together tools, but none of them were according to Dee's journals. Like my holy table was a double cube altar Golden Dawn style, but then I painted the holy table on top of it. I actually I got 4 wooden discs to paint the seal of the true God on, and put that under the 4 corners of the table on the floor. My seal of truth was a big wooden disc instead of wax.
Yes.
And I'm just giving you examples of things where I approximated what Dee had been given, but didn't completely do it exactly the way the angels said to do.
Yes,
and that actually served me for a very long time. I was able to communicate with the angels, to do the entire angelical language and Essential Enochian Grimoire book. All of that came from my work with them. They led me and taught me and all of that. But once I had completed that, and they said, okay, now you've got the language down, you've got how to make the tools down, you've deciphered all this stuff out of Dee's grimoires, you've got it in this nice, published format. And they said, now don't bother calling us again until you make all the tools correctly. So it's literally been years since I've done an Enochian evocation, because I'm not allowed to call them again until I've made all the tools exactly the way they told Dee to make them.
So even like if you're making Liber Loagath, or like say the book for Gebofal, that's the one where you like have to the 49 by 49 table, and you have to
49 tables is pronounced
it.
Loga.
Loga. I'm sorry, you're the
Oh,
scholar.
that's okay. That's just what that's one of the few those obscure words the angels did tell D how to pronounce, or for some reason the AETH, the eighth at the end of it, is silent.
Well, here's another question that I wanted to ask.
Jellicle is weird.
I asked Scott about it when we interviewed him. And there's this one tool within Enochian that I've never been able to figure out what it does, what's it for, but I have one made, and that's the Tablet of Nalvage. Have you been able to find anything applicable with this? Because Scott Stenwick said, I don't use it. Now, in your cases, have you ever been able to figure out what it's for or what we use it for?
Oh, I know what it's for, but it's not a tool, and it has nothing to do with the practical magic. It's not something you'll actually make and use in the magic. Basically, the tablet of Nalvage, or it's called the Corpus Omnium, the body of the world, and there's a lot of mysteries encoded into it in the words that are used to create it, as you probably know.
Yeah.
But that is a miniaturized, like a microcosmic representation of an infinite table that Nalvage stood on whenever he delivered the Book of Loga, and when the calls were delivered, actually. So Nalvage would stand on this table of infinite letters, and he would tell D where to draw the letters from. So later on, the Corpus Omnium was given as symbolic of that, but there is no place for it in the practical magic. Like, you're not supposed to make it into a talisman. It's also true of the other tables in the system, like the 4 watchtowers.
Yeah.
The Golden Dawn likes to make those into flashing tablets and put them around the circle. That is not in D's journals. Those tables have no practical application in the system. The tables are there to decode names from. That's it.
So it's basically like a gematria.
It's magic that came through the mind of a cryptographer.
Wow.
So the seal of truth is constructed from all these complex tables where you decode the angels' names and put them on the seal. But all those tables have nothing to do with it after that point. The seal is what you were making. The tablets are not around the circle, all that stuff. None of that is there. That's all later Golden Dawn edition. That's all Neo-Enochian.
So it's like reference material, something you would use to prepare your rituals, not something you'd use in them.
Well, more specifically, it's what D was given to decrypt the system from. But he already did that work of decrypting it, so we don't have to. So you'll notice in my the Essential Enochian Grimoire, there is a distinct lack of any of those tables in the book. I just say, here are the angels and spirits, here's their sigils, here's the rituals to call them with, because that is the system that D gave. None of those tables actually play into the system on a practical level at all.
Well, Mr. Leitch, I have 2 questions that was sent last week, even preparing for your interview, because we have some fans of you out here from Mysterium, and they wanted to pick your brain about 2 topics. The first one was, basically to sum it up, they were asking, which system did you find within Enochian more your liking? The Heptarchia, the scrying of the Aethers, the more mystical practices like the Gebofal, is because like they're kind of like mixed up as to where they should begin. Should they focus on the evocatory side of it, which is the Heptarchia, or the more transmuting your energy side of it, which is the scrying of the Aethers, or the more mystical practices within the system?
Well, I would say, okay, for me, it's just really going to depend on you. Okay. For me personally, I haven't done a whole lot with the Heptarchia. Like, I haven't, because, and the main reason for that is because, well, actually, that's not even true either. The 7 archangels from the Heptameron are the main players in the Heptarchia. Those are the 7 angels who are in charge of all the kings and princes of the Heptarchia. And I do work with those 7 archangels. But it's just in my day-to-day practice, I just go to those archangels. I haven't really had need to call, Bethaphus and Bornego and all them. So I don't really do a lot with the specifically heptarchic stuff. I'm really more interested in the mystical side of it, Now I have not performed the full Gebofal ritual because you can only do that when God calls you to do it.
Yeah.
And it's a massive thing. You don't ever do it out of curiosity. It's like doing Abramelin or taking your 5-6 in the Golden Dawn, or I mean, I'm not saying it's the same as those. I'm saying it's as big as those. So I'll do that when I get all of my tools completed the way I was told. And then when God says do it, I'll do it. But I'm still, that's the direction I'm going. I'm not so into the Heptarchia. I'm really more interested in opening those gates of heaven and exploring them and seeing what the angels are going to teach me when I call them out.
Which brings us to the next question. You actually brought it up. Somebody was asking what would you recommend as a more intense practice to focus on for like a one-time thing, the Abramelin or to attempt the Gebofal? Because they can seem both equally heavy. And I do know that you teach your Abramelin course, and that's a demand in itself. But also the Gebofal is in itself its own monster. So from your point of view, it's like, let's say, are you going to go the Abramelin route? How does it differ from the Gebofal? Do you get the same result, or are these two completely different monsters?
They're very, very different. See, what you're going to get out of Gebofal is you can't define it. I don't know if you're familiar with, or I guess you've read my angelical language book, so you saw where I describe counting the Omer, which is a very old Jewish practice. It's associated with the 50 gates of wisdom, and Gebofal is basically Dee's Christianized version of counting the Omer. So the idea in counting the Omer was you would do these meditations over the 50 days. And each day was associated with both a prophet and a sphere on the tree of life. So you would literally meditate on these prophets and what the Bible had to say about them, and you would work your way up the tree of life with these meditations. Once you would open up all 49 gates from Malkuth to Binah, or from Malkuth to Hesed, the 50th gate you can't open. You can only open the 49. And then once you get to that 50th gate, it'll part just slightly, just a little bit. And then the light of God will hit you, and whatever God has for you will be given to you right there, whether it's a message, a gift, whatever. That's where you'll get that.
Wow.
So Gebofal is basically the same idea. So you can't know going in what God has in store for you at the end. Abramelin is very different. Abramelin is a crowning ceremony. You're performing Abramelin to have your holy guardian angel put to your head permanently. And that guardian angel becomes your teacher, your protector, your intermediary. Everything becomes the center of your magical practice. So the two are like really just completely different intentions, outcomes.
Amazing. So tell us more about your shop, Doc Solomon's. I mean, I love the stuff that you sell. I also love the lessons that you're offering. Like, I'm sure viewers want to know about what you offer. What was some of your inspirations of starting one of the more, how do I say, recognizable brands in occultism?
Wow. Honestly, a lot of it is just because, being a Solomonic magician, being a grimoire magician, there's a lot of materials that you have to have. Thread spun by a young maiden, candles that are made of specific materials on a specific day, just all this stuff. And it all requires magical timing and ritual purity to make these things. And you can't, it's not the same as just going online and buying a mass-produced talisman or something, because you don't know who made it, you don't know when they made it or where they made it, you don't know anything about it, who else has touched it or come in contact with it. So I wanted to create a store that could provide these obscure holy objects that you couldn't get anywhere else. So that was kind of my plan for that, and it just grew from there.
I love the work you're doing.
International Imports has a line of talismans of the Goetic demons, and you can get them.
Who has that?
International Imports.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're made by their I guess they have a collective group of people that just give themselves the name Anariva, and
oh geez.
And she writes these books and makes these oils and has talismans, but they have the Goetic demon sigils on them. Like, you just wear this for luck.
Just wear this for luck.
What kind of luck you're asking about?
It's so completely irresponsible, some of the stuff that gets out there. And half the time I think that it's just put out there as a trap. Like, you know what? If you want to buy this, you kind of earned whatever is coming your way.
You know, this reminds me, you guys have read Don Craig's book. Do you remember him describing in the book that he had encountered, he actually had it in his possession. It was a board game based on the Goetia.
Whoa.
The pieces that you would move around on the board were the sigils of the spirits. And I think the conjurations were part of the gameplay and everything. He said it was the most irresponsible, dangerous thing. When he passed away, I went to his wife and asked her if she had found that in his stuff, because I've got a lot of his stuff here. A lot of his artwork and stuff is in my temple now. And I was hoping I could get my hands on that board game. And she went through everything and couldn't find it. He must have destroyed it or given it away. I don't think he'd give it away.
Yeah.
So he must have destroyed it, or maybe it got lost or something. But I so wanted my hands on that board
I could
game.
create such a game sitting in some junk shop somewhere. This combination of Ouija and Monopoly, just sitting in a junk shop waiting for these two young kids to find it and go home and play their own version of Jumanji Hell. Yeah.
We have one more question.
Goetopoly.
There's one more question from the fan page that's actually somebody wanted to ask you that they couldn't piece together. They're a fan of yours. They asked to remain anonymous, but Robert, please ask Mr. Leitch who is his favorite Ghostbuster.
Okay, the first answer is all of them.
Okay, of course, yeah, they're a team.
And the second answer, if you really want to understand my psychology, get this. Vinkman, Ray, and Winston were all men that when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up to be.
Mm-hmm.
Egon is who I already was. So if I have to choose a favorite, I guess I'd say Egon, but really, just all four of them. They're a team, and they make the magic as being together. And
you want to know actually my favorite, and this is it's going to be an unpopular opinion. My favorite was Lewis.
He's cool. Hey, he put on a pack in the second movie.
He had nothing except his girlfriend telling him, "You can do this," and he just went in there on sheer balls alone, and had no
all
idea
by himself too.
And got up there and did his thing. And I was looking at that like, wow, for being a young nerd with nothing else going on in his life, that guy has got balls the size of church bells.
That's true. He stepped up. Hey, he's the key master, man.
Yeah, something must have jumped through him. Yes, I wish they would have returned him for the later movie, but it's a pity they didn't.
We wanted to see him, but he's mostly done with acting. Maybe they can get him to come back for the sequel.
That would be great.
That would be something. That would be something that he would be able to use later in life in his ritual things. If he wanted to pursue like an occult career, he'd be able to, address his spirits. I am the key master of Gozer.
I'm the key master of Gozer. I am Vince Clortho. Talk about spiritual authority, right?
Oh my God.
We're going to jump now. Thank you very much for your introduction, Mr. Leitch. Now we're going to jump now to what we call the current event segment of the show. All right. At this point, it's kind of like Jon Stewart. Very lightly, we're going to ask you, based upon your practices of the Abramelin, Goetia, ceremonial magic, Enochian. I mean, you're sitting there and you're offering a lot of people knowledge, but at the same time, a lot of things are going on in the modern community about these practices. Some people have concerns, hopes, wishes, and gripes about what's going on. Like sometimes people are bastardizing practices or sometimes practices are growing. So here's where we want to ask you about like the state of affairs of your choice of practices. What can you say about the present state of affairs of Enochian magic, Solomonic magic? Is it growing? Is it dying? Is it watering down? And what are some hopes you have for these practices in the near future?
Well, I have to say, I can see where the complaints are coming from. I mean, if you go onto TikTok, if you go to a lot of the groups on Facebook, like God forbid the Goetia study group, or frankly, I've kind of learned that any group on Facebook that ends with study group is toxic and get away. I don't know why, but as soon as you call something a study group, just walk away from it. It's just dead. So yeah, I can see where the complaints are coming from. But here's the thing about occultism and mysticism in general. There has always, throughout all of history, there has been concentric rings of people who are involved in mysticism. You're going to have your outer ring of wannabes and posers and LARPers, you know, and in there, within that, you're going to have a circle of people who maybe not be experts, but they're at least sincere. And, you know, they do the magic, like, you know, on the weekends when they can or something. And then you're going to have another circle inside that one of the really dedicated, serious people. And then you're going to have another ring inside there of your guys like me with no social life. And so this is what they dedicate their entire being to. And, you know, they make a living doing it. So, well, I say make a living, that's not a requisite, but I'm saying that that is what they do for their life. That is everything to them.
It's their vocation.
So, yeah. And that I mean, we said this in the 90s. We're saying it now. I know they said it in the 80s. They said it in the 70s. And they Agrippa says it. Trithemius says it. It goes back hundreds and even thousands of years. And they're always saying the same thing. Oh, the state of occultism today, it's just being watered down. There's all these people practicing it that don't know what they're talking about. And it's, you know, oh, it's dying. It's not going to last another generation. And it always does, because they're always referring to that outer ring of LARPers and wannabes and posers.
Yeah.
And they're not paying attention to that inner group of dedicated people. And that inner group of dedicated people is always there. It always has been. And I think it's always going to be. So if all you're seeing in occultism is the outer ring, you need to look deeper. You need to go deeper. You need to find the people that are serious, because they are there. And there are more of them now than there ever has been in history, just because of how easy it is for us all to communicate now.
Yeah, the knowledge is so much easier to get to. Like,
the community is a garden. If you look at all the seeds that don't sprout, at all the sprouts that don't flower, you'd say, "Oh my God, this garden is dead." But it's not, because the minute you pull down that first basket of tomatoes, you realize, like, no, this worked. I just had to have 100 seeds out there to produce 50 plants to produce 24 tomatoes.
Because but that's one thing I want to share. There's a lot of texts coming out on, especially the Enochian practice, especially with the Kindle being such an easy means of getting knowledge. That with a push of a button, you can get an ebook effortlessly. And there are some practices that are like more traditional, like your stuff's available there. I like that. There are other people who came out of the woodwork that, like, I don't want to mention any names because I don't want to like shoot down anybody, but it's like, wait a minute, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, anybody can publish a Kindle book nowadays. And there's really no gauging, the level. Is this for real or is this not? I don't want to mention any names because I don't want to get like a lawsuit for the show, but I'm sure you can think of a few personalities that crapped out stuff and have got a lot of following, which is just like, wait, is this really the way to go? You know what I mean? So do you think we have more authentic practitioners now than ever? Or do you think some of the stuff that we have is getting a bit watered down and we need more errands out there to educate the practice?
It's like I said, it's both. There are more LARPers and posers out there now than there ever has been. And because of that, you're going to have the grifters who will come in and sell stuff to them. And that's been true for hundreds of years. That hasn't changed. It's just more now.
Damn.
But once we get into that inner circle, the really dedicated people, not just the small, but even the circles out from them that are sincere and really wanting to learn. I would say there is more of them now than there ever has been. And once you get to those inner circles and you really start talking to them, you'll learn that, let's just say the grimoires, I'll just focus on them as an example. We know more today about the grimoires than ever before in history. We have had more of them translated into English than ever before in history. You've got Joseph Peterson, and you've got Stephen Skinner, and you've got, Johannes Matthias, and you've got all these, David Rankine, and big names of really good scholars who are releasing really good material on this stuff. You've also got the Penn State Press books, and my God, by now they're up to a couple hundred of those things. So there's so much good information now. And remember when I made the joke about Crowley? Crowley didn't understand the grimoires.
Yeah.
That wasn't just bashing on Crowley. None of those guys did. None of those guys had the resources to understand as much about the text as we do now. So
if you look at the end of the Goetia, the end of Crowley's Goetia, when he talks about the Artem Novum, and he says, oh, this is a translation of certain names. But if you go through and you line up the translation, you look at it, you're like, wait a minute. These aren't translations of the words. This is the lines in a ritual that you're supposed to conduct while you're making all of your, because the Artem Novum is your
Exactly.
prep work before you do the Goetia. It's all of the rituals that you would use to make your safety equipment.
Yeah.
The circle
As
and the
far
lamen and the
yeah, as far as
and
I
you get it.
know, that bizarre title, it wasn't Crowley's, it is in the original Goetia. But why it's titled that, I have no idea, because you're absolutely right. Those prayers at the end are supposed to be spoken, like the prayer that's associated with the triangle. You're supposed to be saying that prayer while you inscribe the
While you
triangle.
do the thing.
The ones
Now
associated
it's
with
in
the
the
circle,
Stone
you're supposed to be saying
2731.
those. Yeah, so
It's
I
in the
don't.
Stone 2731, but not the 3846, which are the
Yeah, I
two
think it's a,
most
but it might
common.
just be a bizarre mistranslation or something, because it's not an explanation of the names. It's just giving you the name. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird quirk of
It's
the
an
Goetia. But
explanation
yeah,
of what
those
the
are
names
actually
are
rituals.
for. Yeah, he clearly didn't understand what it was. And then the
No,
people who translated the book or who published the book later also clearly didn't understand what it was.
that's
But
correct.
when I did the Lemegeton, I was looking through it and I thought it hit me like, wait a minute, this is all wrong. This is stuff you need to do. This should be the first book. This before you do
Yep,
any of the other things, you should be doing this.
yep.
Anyhow, thank you. Well, Mr. Leitch, just wanted to say thank you so far for sharing that part. We're going to go to our third and final segment of the show, is what we call Occultex. This is where we learn something directly from you. It could be as obscure, simple, or as advanced as whatever it is we want, but we want our viewers to learn something from an honorable teacher like you. So me and Wade are eager to hear what you have prepared for us today. It could be anything that you'd like.
Yeah, I thought about this. Like we said in I don't really teach magic in this kind of format, so I'm not going to give like a formula that would get anyone in any kind of trouble or anything
Yes.
like that.
And thank
But
you for that.
I will tell you an experience that I just had, and this literally just happened maybe a week ago.
Okay.
I make talismans for clients, obviously. And the way I consecrate them is I use the method in the Key of Solomon, where you do it on a day and hour. Well, you can do it on a day and hour of Wednesday, or of Mercury on a Wednesday, or you can do it on the day and hour of the planet of the talisman. And it gives this long list of psalms that you say over the test. So essentially, and a lot of Solomonic magic works this way, because it was kind of written with the kind of unspoken assumption that you would be an ordained priest before you tried this stuff. So a lot of Solomonic magic boils down to putting the object on an altar and then performing a service over it. So, you put the talisman there and then you just read all these psalms, and it's like you're doing a church service, and then that's the consecration. And I've been doing this for years, I do it for myself, but I do it more for clients. And usually when I'm doing them for clients, I'm either doing like a one-off talisman, or maybe I'll do a group of talismans together on the altar at the same time. So because of that, all these years, this idea never came to me. But just over the last couple of weeks, I've been doing a whole series of consecrations. This guy invested a lot of money into sending me probably like 12 talismans or something. It's a lot. And it's every planet. So I had to go to every single altar one day after another and do these consecrations, which means the same long list of psalms over and over. And for the first time, I guess it was my guardian angel spoke to me, and I can't really give you the message, but I can give you the idea of it. And the idea is, you'll find in the grimoires, especially with talismans, you'll see psalms written around the talismans. And one thing the old masters used to do is they would alter the psalm. Like if the psalm was, asking for a particular blessing, they might actually change the line to say what that blessing is. This talisman is to bring wealth. So you use a psalm about bringing gifts from God, but you'll mention wealth. You'll add that to the line. So there's different ways you can alter the lines in and you can use them as incantations in your spells too. So I was performing these, and I was about 3 days into this week-long process, and I got the message, you need to be changing these. And I'd never thought of that before, because for the consecration, I just read the Psalms. And usually if I'm doing it for myself, the Psalms are in first person. So, the prayers have meaning to you. But the message was, you need to change these and put your client's name in these. So it was a little difficult for me because I'm very much a person of habit, and I've been doing these psalms for years and years and years. And now I'm being told to change them. So in every instance in the Psalms where it was first person and I would refer to myself, I would change it to he, and I would put his name in it instead.
Mm-hmm.
And by making that one simple little change, it totally transformed what I was doing. Suddenly, it wasn't just a service I was hosting over talismans to consecrate them. It literally made the whole ritual about that client.
Wow.
And this is hard to describe because it's not like the words of the Psalms change or what the Psalms were asking for. But when you're asking for them for yourself, it's a different feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started literally listing him and using third person pronouns instead of first person, the whole energy changed. And I just started seeing how the Psalms really covered the spiritual state of the person I was asking for, what the talismans were supposed to do for him. It's like everything came together, and it was like turning on a generator.
Wow.
And the ritual that I had been doing for years suddenly just more powerful, and it was just incredible. So that's kind of my what I want to share is, if you're going to be doing Solomonic magic and you're using those psalms and you're doing it for someone else, which you should be, this kind of magic, you should be doing it for other people. Change the psalms, change the pronouns to third person, put the name of the person that you're doing the work for in the psalm. And believe me, it is like flipping a light switch. It's night and day.
Damn. Well, thank you for that. I'm definitely going to give that a try when I try consecrating my own talisman. So with that, Mr. Leitch, I just want to say thank you very much for a wonderful interview. It's such an honor to have somebody so knowledgeable, and I hope we can have you again in a future episode, especially since season 2 is coming around the corner. Wade, is there anything you'd like to ask Aaron before we go?
You know, the way you described the result of the Gebofal working, I hope I said that right.
Like I said, we don't know. Gebofal, we don't know.
Yeah. What it reminded me of, the first visual I got, and I tend to like kind of translate things into something that's more relatable to me. When they opened the Ark of the Covenant at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
And everybody kind of got what they had coming. So you don't really know what you have coming when you lift the lid and peek into there. And I thought,
that's right.
This is,
and if you've asked the wrong questions, you can get yourself.
Exactly. And I was thinking, like, that'd be an interesting thing to try. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, bad things happen. I remember that.
Yeah. What's interesting, you look at it that way because there's a very heavy Merkava element in the Gebofal ritual.
Exactly.
And if you look in the old Merkava text, that's what they said: is you're going up through the gates of heaven, they're guarded, and if you don't have the right, well, I don't want to put that wrong. If there's anything in you that is contrary to the heaven you're trying to get in, they're going to burn it out of you right then and there before you can go in. So yeah, you'll get what's coming to you when you open those gates, and you don't know until you get there. So
that's a trailer.
You know what? It's kind of like when you make your crossing. If you look at it that way, that it's basically you are taking all of the elements of yourself, and whatever part of you isn't part of God is just burned right out of you.
Burned out, and that can be an unpleasant process, believe me.
That are the parts of yourself that you like and the parts of yourself that you don't like, but there's parts of both that are actually you. And there's a whole bunch of stuff you may like that is just going to go away.
Yep. You may like it, but if it's hindering you or not beneficial to you, or they'll burn it right out of you.
I lost a lot when I made my crossing, but I gained a lot. I became a completely different person.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Mr. Leitch, thank you very much for the opportunity. We're going to close the show now, and thank you very much for taking the time for us. And is there anything
thanks for having me on?
Any kind of show or any kind of service, your website, where can they find you for those who are interested in learning more about you?
You can the website is docsolomons with an S, docsolomons.com. So you can go there and look at all the products we offer, maiden spun thread, beeswax ritual candles. I mean, all the obscure stuff that you need for grimoire work that you can't get elsewhere, you can get there. Plus, that's where I put all my classes. We got grimoire classes, Abramelin classes, tarot classes, ancestral work classes. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Other than that, if you want to find me, I'm on Patreon. You can find me as Aaron Leitch on Patreon. Also, you can find the Doxall page on Facebook, and that's where I keep people updated on what's going on with the store and anything new. And yeah, that's where you'll find me for the most part.
Well, thank you, Mr. Leitch, for everything that you've contributed to the study of Enochian and ceremonial magic. You are a real legend. And any books coming out soon that we can look forward to that you can spoil us with, or we just got to keep looking on the pages?
Keep looking on. Right now, I'm working on. I have one more class in the Abramelin, which is how to work with the spirits, the demons of the system. I got to finish that one, and I'm finally getting some serious work done on the Solomonic advanced courses, which is where we'll talk about Goetia, angelic evocation, your guardian angel, all that stuff, all the advanced stuff. And as far as books, the next book will probably be my Abramelin book. When I finish the last class, finally, I will take that entire course and translate it into a book format. And then I'm also going to include all the linguistic and deciphering work I've done on the word squares. So that's probably a couple years off, but that'll be my next my next full-length book.
Looking forward to that one. So once again, Mr. Leitch, thank you very much. Hope to have you again in the future. I'm going to end the show now. I'm going to hit pause.